Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever looked around at the world and thought, why is God completely silent while evil is just thriving? Well, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're jumping straight into the Bible, specifically the book of Habakkuk. It is literally one of the most shocking, mind-bending prophetic books you will ever read. We're going to unpack this ancient text right now and see exactly why its truths are fiercely relevant to us today. Let's get into it.
Look at how this tension is just brilliantly captured right in chapter 1, verse 5. God says, "For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told." Okay, so what happens when God does an astounding work, but that work actually involves using evil to punish evil? I mean, it's a massive theological collision. Today, we're going to see exactly how this ancient crisis defines the absolute core of the Christian gospel.
But before we hit that earth-shattering answer, I just want to quickly ask our tribe to help get this biblical truth out there. Take a quick second to like, comment, and share this explainer. If you want to dig even deeper into the Word, check out sermonacademy.com, and if you're able, consider supporting the mission at sermonacademy.com/donate. All right, let's set the stage.
Look at the historical creation story of late 7th century Judah. Guys, it is a rapid decline. Right in 609 BC, the good King Josiah dies, and Judah just spirals into extreme moral decay and violent corruption under this puppet king, Jehoiakim. Meanwhile, the ruthless Babylonian Empire, the Chaldeans, they're rising to global supremacy by 605 BC. This perfectly sets the stage for the devastating deportations of the Jewish people. The whole infrastructure is just completely collapsing.
Enter Habakkuk. He's acting as a watchman for the righteous remnant, and he brings this raw, incredibly honest lament to God. He cries out, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear, or cry to you violence, and you will not save?" You see, he's looking at the systemic injustice, the paralyzed law in his very own nation, and he is just desperate. He's essentially asking why heaven is standing by while the wicked swallow up the righteous.
So here's a crucial point. Habakkuk is not rebelling against God here. He is wrestling with a holy God. This is faithful lament. He knows God's character is pure, and honestly, that's what makes the reality of unchecked domestic violence and perverted justice in Judah so incredibly confusing for him. He's asking the exact same question believers ask today when they observe severe injustice. Why is heaven strangely silent?
Well, God does break the silence, but his answer is completely shocking. He says, "For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation." God is telling him, look, I am not ignoring Judah's sin, I'm actually raising up the Babylonians as the instruments of my divine discipline. I mean, the cure sounds vastly worse than the disease, doesn't it?
And this creates a massive theological crisis for the prophet. It totally begs the question, how can a God of pure eyes literally too pure to look upon evil, use arrogant pagan idolaters to punish a nation that, sure, they're sinful, but they are still way more righteous than Babylon? Habakkuk is deeply scandalized by this.
But notice what he does next. Chapter 2, verse 1 shows us his active choice. Instead of just throwing his hands up and walking away in bitterness, he positions himself on the metaphorical watchtower. He decides to wait. He actively looks out to see how the Lord is going to resolve this terrifying contradiction. He cuts out the noise of the culture and just waits for divine revelation. And God's response? It forms the core of the entire book.
Here it is. This is God's ultimate response, the absolute theological heartbeat of Habakkuk. God contrasts two completely different postures toward life. On one hand, you have the proud, puffed-up soul of the Chaldean. This is the person relying purely on human strength and self-reliance. Think of it like an inflated, empty bag of chips that just crushes under the slightest pressure. But on the other hand, we have the righteous person who lives by faith, relying entirely on God. Let's look at the original Hebrew text for that famous phrase, "the righteous shall live by his faith." The word used for faith here is Emunah. And this isn't just, a simple mental agreement. It means steadiness. It means reliability, fidelity. It is unwavering trust in the covenant God right in the middle of a collapsing infrastructure. God's basically telling Habakkuk, to survive this, you have to maintain an active, lived-out loyalty to me, even when the entire geopolitical world is falling apart. And here's the amazing part. This ancient creed doesn't just stay in the Old Testament. It echoes super loudly right into the New Testament, becoming the foundational bedrock of Christian salvation. The Apostle Paul quotes Habakkuk 2:4 in Romans 1:17 for forensic justification. He uses it again in Galatians 3:11 to prove the exclusivity of grace, meaning we're saved totally by God's grace through faith, not works.
and the author of Hebrews uses it to encourage believers to persevere.
The Greek New Testament takes Habakkuk's survival-oriented faith and expands it directly into the doctrine of justification. Take the Greek word dikaiosin. It represents the literal gift of God's own righteous standing being credited or imputed to the believer. It answers the biggest question of all. How did the lawless and the guilty become declared righteous before God? The answer, by faith alone.
And you see, this is where the story arcs perfectly to Jesus Christ. Habakkuk was so shocked that God would use the wicked Chaldeans, but that astounding work in the Old Testament, it perfectly prefigures the ultimate, scandalous, redemptive work of the cross. God utilized a highly offensive methodology to achieve our redemption. He allowed His perfect, sinless, incarnate Son to be unjustly condemned, mocked, and executed by wicked men.
So it really all comes down to this. How does a holy God forgive sin without simply bypassing justice? Because, let's be real, if God just winked at sin, He wouldn't be just at all. Jesus is the ultimate answer to Habakkuk's agonizing questions. On the cross, Jesus absorbed the full, unmitigated judgment and the woes meant for the wicked. Because of Jesus, God can be perfectly just and the justifier of those who have faith in Him.
So, because we've been freely justified by faith, how on earth should we live? Well, the biblical mandate is pretty clear. Our salvation cannot be disconnected from our actions. Believers are called to actively seek justice in the modern world, fighting against systemic oppression wherever it exists, and operating as true ambassadors of Christ's kingdom, without falling into passive, worldly tribalism.
Which leads us to the climax of the book in chapter 3. Habakkuk actually shifts from his complaint to a ritual of defiant joy. He says, "Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, yet I will rejoice in the Lord." Think about that. He is describing a complete collapse of the agricultural economy, total devastation. Yet he proves that true faith rejoices in God for who He is, not just for the blessings He hands out.
This imagery perfectly captures the supernatural strength God provides. Habakkuk writes, "He makes my feet like the deer's." Just picture mountain deer navigating those jagged, dangerous cliffs with absolute perfect steadiness. This is not a promise of an easy life, guys. It's a promise of spiritual agility. God gives believers the supernatural ability to walk through the dangerous, terrifying terrain of suffering with total confidence in Him.
Habakkuk actually concludes with this incredible vision of God marching in power, and it's a massive new Exodus motif. Just as God historically delivered Israel from Egypt with plagues and parted seas, Habakkuk's vision is pointing straight forward to the ultimate spiritual Exodus. That is Jesus Christ leading His church out of the absolute bondage of sin and death through His triumphant cross and resurrection.
All right, before we wrap this up, just a quick reminder. If you found this explainer helpful, please hit that like button, leave us a comment, and share it with someone who really needs to hear this. For more robust biblical training, come join the mission over at sermonacademy.com and consider supporting us at sermonacademy.com/donate.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Habakkuk learned the hard way that the righteous must live by faith, not by sight. So, when your world falls apart, when your circumstances offer absolutely no earthly encouragement whatsoever, and your barn is completely empty, will you shrink back in fear, or are you going to stand on the watchtower, cling to the cross of Christ, and actively live by faith? The choice is yours. Keep seeking the truth, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.